Hi everyone, I got a lot of requests on my post about my rainbow dungarees, on how I made them, so as promised, here is my video on how I make my dungarees. Step 1, you're going to take your nice big bit of fabric and you are going to fold over one side, just like that. Next, I have laid my dungarees flat on the fold, but we are only going to be using half of the dungarees to create the pattern. Make sure that the seam of the side of the leg meets up with your edge of your fabric. I'm also cheating, my fabric already has a nice bottom seam, so I'm leaving that for my bottom of my leg, but if you don't, move your trousers up the pattern so you've got a bit of fabric to turn over and sew to create the bottom of your dungarees. So at this point, what you're going to do is draw around your dungarees in pencil or chalk, but making sure that you only draw around a singular half of your dungarees. So I've gone up the leg to the crotch area, around this little side seam, up here, and at these bits I've put little markers so I know where I turn in. I'm going to move this off and you're going to have part of your pattern already down. Now this little bit here is where you're going to put the bend that will make your crotch area. So I'm going to draw and then attach it all the way to this top one. So there we have it. I have drawn around one side of my dungarees, making sure that the outside leg seam is on the fold of the fabric. Now once you get to this point and you have drawn around your dungarees, it's time to add your seam allowance. So we're going to go back round and draw about an inch away and just go round the whole thing, adding an inch or two for your seam allowance. So this is what it should look like once you've added your seam allowance. I've drawn a line following my other line about an inch in, all the way around the dungaree pattern, and now it is time to cut. And make sure you're cutting on the outside, not the inside. You want to give yourself enough space to sew and find scissors that work. So there we have our first side of our dungaree pattern cut out. Just make sure that you leave the fold intact. We need that. So at this point we are ready to make the other side of our dungarees. We are going to take this side of the fabric up the fold and we're going to flip it over and put it along this fold over here. Now all you've got to do is cut all the way around that pattern that you have just flipped over. Excuse the big dust mark. I'll get rid of that when I'm printing. And once you've managed to cut out your second piece, you have both sides of your dungarees and you are ready to start sewing. So what you're going to do next is take both pieces of your pattern and make sure they are folded, faces touching. So what that means is the good side of your fabric will be touching the other good side of your fabric. So we are sewing on the back of the fabric. Now I'm ready to start sewing, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the crotch of the fabric and I'm going to start in the middle and sew all the way down right to the bottom of the ankle, but only that part for now, and I'm going to do that on both sets. So I'm going to start right up in the corner and just go for it. If you're feeling fancy, you can obviously pin it, but I don't have any pins. So once you've sewn up both sides in the centre of your seam allowance, if you have an overlocker, you would obviously go ahead and overlock them now, but what I'm going to do is fold just the edge over and use a zigzag stitch on my machine to overlock the fabric to stop it fraying inside the leg. And this is what they look like after I have turned the fabric over and sewed a zigzag stitch all the way up to lock them in place. So once you've sewed up both of the inside leg seams and you have turned one side of your pattern the correct way around so the seam disappears, lay them on the floor so the points are facing each other. Then take the one that you have flipped inside out, or the right way round now, turn it over, and you're going to slot it inside the other pattern so it matches up completely but inside the other pattern. Is with our dungarees tucked into each other, you're going to be following that seam up the leg, and we're going to be sewing the crotch and the chest together. So if we come over here, we're going to open up, making sure there are 2 bits of fabric on each side, and we're going to open up this bit here, and we're going to be sewing from your centre point all the way up and through these parts. So now I'm going to get ready and sew all the way along, up through the crotch, into the chest of the dungarees, and stop when I get to the flat edge at the top. What I like to do is start from the centre to make sure everything's lined up, as I'm not pinning things, so things don't slip when I'm sewing. Work all the way up to one side, flip my fabric around and do the second side. And this is what they should look like once you've finished the crotch to the chest seam. So I've run all the way up and through, making sure I'm only obviously sewing 2 layers of fabric together to create the crotch. It's now time to open up your dungarees, but making sure that the good side of the fabric is still hidden, so we're still working on the wrong side of the fabric or the back of the fabric if your fabric is patterned. So once you've opened up your dungarees, making sure that we're still working on the wrong side of the fabric so you can see all of your stitching, we are going to sew up our side seams down here. And this is after I have sewed up my outside hip seam. So as you can see, I've sewed it up right down the edge, and then as I've got to here, I've just brought it off the edge of the fabric to keep a nice sloping line for your hips. Now we're going to move on to the top of our dungarees, to the bib, and we're going to take our arm seam, fold it inwards and sew it up. Just make sure that you're still working on the wrong side of your fabric. You want to be able to see all your seams at the same time. And now I have sewn over my underarm seams on both sides. I'm going to flip over the top and sew the top of the bib. So just take one side, flip it over, and you're going to sew straight along there. So now I've folded and sewn my top seam of the bib. I did the back one too. I made that one a little bit lower. I just folded this bit extra because I like my bib on the back to be a bit shorter. Now it's time to go back in and neaten up all these edges by folding and overlocking with a cross stitch. And we are pretty much done at this point with all my edges neatened. You're ready to flip your dungarees the correct way round. And once you've flipped your dungarees around, you should finally be able to see your semi-finished product. Obviously, we're going to need to add a pocket and some straps. So at this point, you're going to want to make some straps for your dungarees. I'm super lucky because my fabric has a really, really wide and solid seam. So I'm going to cut that off and use that as my own straps and cheat. But if you need to make your own straps, it's super simple. What you're going to want is a really long stretch of fabric, or as long as the strap that you want, about 10 centimeters wide. You're going to cut along to make a strip. Once you've made your super long strip, you're going to take your strip and you're going to fold it in half. And then once your fabric is folded in half, you're going to sew up the outer side to close it off and make a big fabric tube. I'd suggest making this strip of fabric long enough for you to make both straps out of. Save yourself some sewing later. And once you've spent a literal hour flipping your strap round the right way, you can cut it in half if you've made it super long, or go ahead and spend the next hour flipping the next strap round. Now I'm going to take my 2 straps, open up the front of my dungarees and sew the straps there and there. And then I'll neaten up this bottom seam at the same time. So the straps are now attached to the inside back of the dungarees. So when you flop your front forwards, and these will come over. Ooh. Now I'm going to fold this bit inwards, sew that up nicely, and add 2 little catches here for those to go through. So now I've got my 2 little togs, just 2 little bits like this. I'm going to fold them over and put them on the inside, just like that. Just sew on the reverse. Then once you've added your little togs, your straps, you are pretty much set and you have finished your dungarees. You can go ahead now and add a pocket on the sides or the front. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.